some people asked me what my thoughts were in regards to Apex. Recently, there were some hints on social media indicating a return for Apex 2016. And many people are taken by surprise because they thought after the Alex Strife incidents back in earlier this year and the whole building fiasco that Apex was done after 2015, that it didn't have the leverage to really move forward. And there's another audience, the broader Smash Brothers audience, that's wondering, why is there backlash? Why are the figureheads, why are these top players so adamantly against Apex? Now, if you haven't updated, I'm not really going to touch upon it too much. One of the big things was the sexual harassment, things that Alex Strife has done to various women, various transgender people, and a handful of minors. I'm not sure of the numbers, but there were countless testimonies and allegations against Alex Strife that led to a pretty big backlash. You can read about it, you can find links to it. I'm not going to talk about it so much from the Alex Strife personal conflicts as much as why tournament organizers were so frustrated with Apex over the years. And to give some of my qualifications, I'm friends with a lot of people on staff that used to be, part of the Apex crew, whether they're volunteers or on staff or TOs. I've been to four Apexes since 2012, so I've been 4 years running. And I just want to talk about logistically the things that consistently go wrong and kind of just irk people to remind us like, oh great, this is another Apex. Now to the broader audience, this probably doesn't matter as much because the end product that you usually get are some really nice high-level matches from the top players. And so 4 months after Apex is over, the only thing that's left as an aftermath are those YouTube matches, the memories of the top 8, and we don't really remember the journey that was the tournament itself. Talking from just a logistical standpoint, Apex has never really been too great. I'm not going to talk about 2015 as much because of the unfortunate building collapse, but when I went in 2012 to 2014, there was just an overall consistency that it was always going to run late. Mango jokes around and says, I can be 3 hours late but be on time still because of how badly brackets run. I believe in 2012 and 2013, I'm going to mix up the years mainly because the venues were very similar. There were large stretches of time where we weren't allowed to touch the TVs. We weren't allowed friendlies, or we were threatened DQs. And as a result, those TVs and those setups were there and doing nothing while people just waited off to this side. But overall, if you go into Apex, you really kind of pay attention, you can see a lot of things just disorganized in general, and things were always late. And when I really look into it, a lot of it was just poor delegation and poor planning. I housed with the Sheridan at 2012, and last minute, Alex Strife asked him to seat the bracket. Now, Sheridan, I think, got minorly compensated, but for the fact that these loose ends need to be tied up at the tournament shows that there's a lot of disorganization. Something that, if this was a Jogo Guy tournament, this was Big House, those things would be taken care of and everything would be streamlined by the tournament. But you'll see the volunteers scrambling, not knowing what to do at every one of these tournaments. And so it just also seems like this is just purely speculation on my end. That if you look at the core members of Apex and Alex Strife, there was really never really any key handoff or empowerment, because when you have a tournament as big as Apex, you're not going to be able to do everything and put your fingers into everything. Maybe for like a small 100 to 200 man tournament you could do that, but when you start scaling up, you're going to have to delegate and allow people to take ownership. And this is something that I really respect Crimson Blur for doing with the Team Oxy team. He delegated a person to say, you are in charge of stream matches every Super Smash Sunday. That is your job. Take ownership. I'm not really going to critique you or micromanage you. I just expect you to get the job done. And this empowers a person in charge of stream matches to say, hey, I have full ownership and I'm going to make it my own. He had people running brackets, making sure that that they were on top of making sure all the setups were being used so we could finish on time. Earlier, during the early stages of Super Smash Sundays, it wasn't as organized as it was towards the end because these people were allowed to take ownership and grow into that mold. And granted, like, they weren't perfect, but Crimson Blur allowed them to make mistakes and allowed them to grow into that. That's not what I really saw with the way that Alex Strife managed things. It seemed like Alex Strife would halfway give the keys to people, saying, like, you're in charge of brackets, you're in charge of this, and these people would make decisions and come to different conclusions, and if Alex disagreed with it, he was just going to step on those toes and say, no, we're going to do it my way. And when you do that as a manager, you're not empowering the people that are volunteering or taking those roles. And so what you get out of that is apathy. And this is something, and you get a lack of ownership. So when I compare the guy that's on Team Oxy that's in charge of matches, he's making sure that he's getting the job done because he has the power and he's been given the authority to do it. When I looked at Apex 2014, especially with the second phases of bracket pools, there were multiple people running around calling matches, but they were kind of doing a halfway job. I'm not saying that they were bad people per se, but it just felt like they weren't given the keys to say, you are responsible, specifically you, to make sure this bracket runs, to make sure that these setups are filled with tournament matches. And so we saw a lot of people not take ownership. It was kind of like that bystander effect, basically, where you assume someone else is going to take care of it, and that's just, and to me that just speaks of just improper delegation and not making people take ownership of what they need to get done. So I'm not going to be like completely harsh because I'll speak some good. For example, with Apex, they did a couple things really good. They were the forerunners and trying to search out for sponsors and make Smash like pretty big. And they were the first really tournament that I'm aware of. My memory might fade me. In terms of wanting all the Smash games together. I know that Project M is not like wasn't included last year, but they were the first tournament to try to incorporate Smash 64, Brawl, Melee, Project M while it was technically still legal, and Smash 4 all together in the same roof. Before that, Smash 64 didn't really have a home in the national tournament. So for that, I think the 64 community is probably really grateful to have in Apex. Apex was one of the first tournaments to really make a strong outreach to build relationships with the fighting game community, or FGC. We didn't really see other big TOs really go after them. And so I think a lot of the relationships and connections that we have with the FGC, with like Team Spooky, Bfuteki, and those groups, we can partially thank to Apex for making that initiative to include fighting game tournaments at our events. They were also the first to really try to get sponsors on board out of all the big tournaments. So for that, I think they had good ideas, and I like their ideology, but unfortunately, I just can't really get with their execution. The more other things that I really see in terms of just things that just were mismanaged, Jogo Guy, tweeted this out last tournament, and it was the venue capacity. And if you looked at the venue capacity between the two rooms of Apex 2015 at the old venue, it was only for 800 people. And I think that's just really cutting corners, and I think that's just like really overdoing it, and I think that's borderline negligence. And so for everybody that was on that decision, I'm not sure who was responsible for looking at contracts, but for the fact that they chose that, and for the fact that they had a system and a leadership that would allow for that, means that that's a huge oversight. And it's not to say like maybe not everybody had a chance to look at it, but if only one person were to look at that contract and look at that venue capacity, I would have huge questions on the leadership for not having a set of checks and balances to say, like, are we making the right decisions, or is this just a one-man show calling all the shots? Let's see what else. But this isn't something that really happened the first time either. At Apex 2014, we had the fire marshal come in and almost shut down the venue for having too many people. So even if you paid for a spectator fee and you wanted to watch those matches, you couldn't watch it because you got kicked out. And this was really important in terms of top 32 and the later stages of bracket. A lot of people couldn't watch those matches because the fire marshal came in and almost shut us down. We had this at Apex 2013 too. If you saw how crowded and crammed the little rows were of setups, it was really hard to maneuver, and you could tell that this was over capacity and it outgrew. And you would think that, you know, after having 2 to 3 consecutive years of being stuck and overcrowded, that they would have the foresight to really get a bigger venue. And also in terms of scheduling, this was a huge mess. I remember, I'm not going to harp on 2015 just for the fact that they lost today, but in 2014 they had an issue where they agreed not to do team doubles for Melee at night. They said that till all the players are done, so Lucky actually went to a bar, and a lot of people dispersed by that point. And then Alex made the decision to say, we're doing doubles at 1 a.m. If you don't come now, you're DQ'd. And to make rash decisions like that really penalized a lot of people. And we saw a lot of people in general got DQ'd very unfairly for a national, where waves got changed last minute, and they expected that a simple Twitter message would be enough to communicate to everyone that pools changed. And so just a lack of, just huge disorganization and just negligence, in my opinion, make Apex really frustrating, because these are very fixable things, and granted, like, they have made improvements year to year, but to see these happen at a national level is frankly embarrassing. And this is why I get frustrated. This is why Jungle Guy gets frustrated. And granted, you know, TOing and event planning does, you know, get, you know, little appreciation, but from my understanding, from looking at the contracts, Alex and crew made a decent amount of money off of this. So if they are going to get paid, you know, decently for this, they need to do a decent job, instead of just putting up a face and say, we promise things will be different, and every year we kind of believe it. We go like, okay, like last year was a fluke, this year they got Twitch, maybe they got this guy, and maybe everything will change. But every year to year we see the same mistakes happen over and over and over again. And granted, they are improving, but it's just so frustrating to deal with. If we're to look ahead, so up to this point, what I'm mainly talking about is just the leadership structure and the way that delegation happens, and the way that Alex, you know, used to try to get his hands into everything, not empowering people to say, like, this is your job, do a good job. It just seemed like it was really disorganized, and there was really no point man. And this is something that we saw at 2015 to a loose extent, but understandably I can't really comment on it because of the extra day and Alex getting kicked out. But it just looks like they need a total restructuring. They need a person that can really delegate and lead and not micromanage. To say, I think Alex Strife has a lot of good qualities too, not from personal standpoints, but like in terms of like advertising and reaching out. I think that's one thing he could do well. Unfortunately, I don't think I'd ever want to have him involved in any Smash event, but if those things didn't happen, you know, he'd be a great marketing guy, and he does great public outreach to companies, but I don't think he makes the greatest CEO or president or whatever you have it. So looking ahead, it's really hard for me to support another Apex, you know, given that I've had 4 years of countless disappointments, where the only redeeming factors are not Apex itself, but more so what the Smash community brings, is just the camaraderie and just like being able to hang out with people that I don't see. I think that's honestly what draws many people to these national events, is just to see old friends. And so that's why we tend to be quick on like going to these events year after year, because even if they're like really terribly run, because we just want to see friends and hang out. But now this year, now that we have so many other events, now that, you know, there's choices, we have the opportunity to go to other events that aren't just Apex. And to be frank, me as a spoiled Californian, every time I go to Apex or go to an East Coast tournament, I get sick no matter what I do. So given that like I can't keep my health up, I can't really recommend myself to go to Apex. For them to really, for me to really honestly recommend Apex to people in the future, I know for the 64 and Brawl community, they don't really have a choice, because Brawl and 64 don't really have other big national showings, which is unfortunate. I would need to see a revamp in leadership structure. Similar to, I would like to see a kind of a Super Smash Con type of structure, where you have this guy, his name is Justin, he's a CEO. He's delegating and finding the right people and saying like, here, I'll give you the resources, I'll give you the money, I'll give you whatever you need to make the tournament successful. So he's gone Jungle Guy and Nintendo, two good people, And under Joe Guy and Nintendo, he's got a bunch of well-qualified people. And if they want to run an event of that size and to have like my personal endorsement, not Melee on me, not really reflecting Melee on me per se, I would need to see stuff like that happen, and I would need to be convinced of the leadership structure that they can run an event of that caliber that can support 2,000 to 3,000 people. But overall, I'm highly skeptical of their communication even now. They ran this announcement that they were going to return for 2016, and apparently a lot of people on last year's staff weren't even aware about this. Nintendo recently found out, apparently. And so just a lot of complexities and a lot of things that make me a little uneasy.